Hi, greetings, fellow lords and ladies. Well, a look at Game of Thrones Season 5 now continues on with the episode High Sparrow. Beginning in King's Landing, as Cersei Lannister passes a large crowd on her way to the Great Sept of Baelor, she is increasingly annoyed as people cheer on Marjorie, completely ignoring her. Tommen Baratheon and Marjorie Tyrell are wed, much to the dismay of Cersei. That night, they consummate their marriage. They are elated and discuss their future together. Tommen thinks that his mother is unhappy in King's Landing. Seeing an opportunity, Marjorie manipulates Tommen into thinking that as long as Cersei stays in King's Landing, she will continue to treat him like a child, watching over him. The next morning, Tommen and Cersei are out for a walk. Tommen tells his mother that he thinks she should return to Casterly Rock if it will make her happy, since he used to talk so fondly of it, but Cersei declines. Deducing that this is Marjorie's doing, Cersei pays her a visit, to find Marjorie busy gloating about her exhausting night with the king. Greeting her mother-in-law, Marjorie is now more confident than ever and subtly rubs her queenship in Cersei's face. Seeing herself losing, Cersei walks away. At Littlefinger's brothel, the Sparrows attack the High Septon as he engages the services of prostitutes dressed as the Seven. He is forced to walk naked through the streets while the Sparrows proclaim him a sinner. Angered by the humiliation, he wants a small council to arrest the Sparrows and execute their leader, the High Sparrow. Although unsympathetic, Cersei decides to meet with High Sparrow, who turns out to be a humble man serving food to the poor, barefoot. The High Sparrow makes no effort to hide the actions of the other Sparrows. Cersei tells him they will not be arrested or executed, and that the High Septon has been imprisoned instead, which surprises the High Sparrow. Returning to the Red Keep, Cersei asks Qyburn send a message to Peter Baelish. As Qyburn writes, behind him, the body of Gregor Clegane begins shaking under the sheet. Qyburn shushes him calmly. Anyway, in the north, while being served lunch by Reek, Roose Bolton schools Ramsay on his recent flame Lord Carwyn, and his family on what was supposed to be a routine tax collection. Ramsay points out that he eventually got the taxes, but Roose reminds his son that terror cannot sustain their hold on the north and that they are outnumbered if the other houses rise up in rebellion. With Tywin Lannister's death, the pact between the Lannisters and the Boltons is effectively dead. Roose then declares that the best way to cement Bolton control of the north is through marriage. Sansa is horrified to see Moat Cailin. There's only one reason Baelish could be taking her there. He means to return her to Winterfell, straight into the arms of the Boltons. Recalling their early discussion of a marriage proposal, Sansa realizes that the proposal is not for him, but for her. It fiercely declares that she would rather die than marry Roose Bolton. Littlefinger corrects her and clarifies that she'll be marrying Ramsay Bolton. The comments are done by convincing her that nobody will look for her there, and suggests that this is her best opportunity for revenge. Sansa reluctantly agrees. From afar, Brienne and Podrick witness Peter and Sansa approach Moat Cailin. Realizing that following them through the castle would be futile, she tries to bypass Moat Cailin by going around. Although Podrick is worried about losing sight of them, Brienne tells him that they don't need to follow them so closely because she knows where they are going. Making camp, Brienne learns how Podrick became Tyrion's squire. Podrick praises Brienne's martial prowess and is quite proud to be her squire, despite her behavior towards him. Brienne apologizes for her rude behavior towards Podrick and offers to teach him how to wield a sword and ride a horse properly. Podrick then questions Brienne about her past with Renly. She reveals that as a young girl, her father held a ball and invited dozens of lords in order to find a good match for her. Brienne was captivated by all the attention she was getting, but her happiness turned to embarrassment when Brienne realized they were all just toying with her. Before she could run away, Renly took Brienne into his arms and told her that those nasty little shits aren't worth crying over, and danced with her. Brienne also acknowledges that Renly was only interested in men, but it didn't stop her from loving him. She says that there is nothing more hateful than failing to protect the ones you love, and intends to avenge Renly by killing Stannis, whom she believes played a role in Renly's murder due to Melisandre's shadow resembling Stannis. At Winterfell itself, the Boltons and their households greet Sansa and Littlefinger. After a tense moment, Sansa graciously accepts Bruce's welcome, putting on an air of politeness that protected her in King's Landing. While from afar, Ramsay's bedworm and secret lover Miranda observes in jealousy and anger. Sansa is later shown to her old room, seemingly foreign to her after all this time. To her surprise, the servant attending her welcomes her back and quietly assures that the North remembers. Later, as Sansa explores the castle, Reek hides his face from her, but seems to have difficulty forcing himself not to call out to her. Elsewhere in the castle, Baelish gently warns Ramsay that against inflicting any harm on Sansa, and discusses the situation with Roose, who was suspicious of Littlefinger's motives in betraying the Lannisters. Baelish points out that Tywin is dead, Jaime is one-handed and politically useless, and that Cersei is about to be forced into the background by Margaery, who is quite fond of Sansa. Bolton, nevertheless, demands to read any messages Littlefinger might send off back to the capital. Anyway, at the Wall, King Stannis Baratheon tries unsuccessfully to convince the new Lord Commander of Night's Watch, Jon Snow, to accept his offer of legitimization. Jon declines Stannis' offer and reiterates that his place is with the Night's Watch. Jon also reiterates the Night's Watch neutrality in the affairs of the Seven Kingdoms and asks Stannis when he plans to leave. Castle Black's stores are insufficient to feed the Night's Watch, Stannis' army, and the Welling prisoners indefinitely. Stannis confirms that his army will leave soon enough to confront the Boltons at Winterfell before the winter snows trap them at the Wall. He leaves the fate of the Welling prisoners in Jon's hands. Elwyn and Jon decide whether to execute them or to see if Tormund is more willing to negotiate than Mance. When Stannis suggests appointing Alliser Thorne as the new commander of Eastwatch by the Sea, Jon retorts that it is better to have your enemies close by than far away. As Davos prepares to leave with his liege, he invites Jon to ponder on the second-to-last stanza of the Night's Watch oath. I am the shield that guard the realms of men. He also assures Jon that Stannis' leadership advice is offered because the king has taken a liking to him. Later at the mess hall, Jon asks Sam about Maester Aemon and has learned that his health is waning and entrusts his care in Sam's hands. Jon begins assigning roles to members of the Night's Watch. He assigns one black brother to oversee the digging of a new latrine pit to accommodate the Welling prisoners. A joke that it seems like a good job for a ginger, which your brother takes with a grin and laughs with the others. Snow also shows respect to Sir Alliser Thorne by appointing him as the new First Ranger, commending his experience. Finally, Lord Commander Snow assigns Janos Slynt with the task of restoring and manning the abandoned castle Greyguard. Slynt refuses Jon not once, but 3 times. Even after it's clarified to be an order, not an offer, and being warned that he is disobeying a direct order, he openly tells Jon that he can take his order and shove it up his bastard arse. Having been publicly disobeyed and insulted by him, the Lord Commander orders Janos taken outside. And calls Ollie to fetch him his sword. Sir Alliser briefly hesitates, but then moves out of the way to let Dolores Headinglers grab Slynt, regularly protests that he has important friends at court, and dismisses the matter as a scare tactic. Jon and Janos drag him to the courtyard where, obedient to the laws of his father Eddard Stark, the man who passes the sentence must swing the sword, and prepares to publicly behead him for treason. Slynt's bluster is lost, and the man who once took a baby girl from her mother's arms and killed her starts crying and begging for mercy, saying he will do whatever Jon asks and that he has always been afraid. Jon hesitates for a moment, but then fixes his nerve and executes the cowardly former commander of the City Watch with a single swing of Longclaw, incidentally exacting small justice on one of the men who betrayed his own father to his death and murdered Robert Baratheon's children. From across the courtyard, Stannis Baratheon sees Jon beheads Janos for refusing his orders, and solemnly nods in approval. Anyway, in Braavos, Arya Stark has been put to work cleaning the main sanctuary of the House of Black and White. She watches as Jaqen H'ghar assists a supplicant and drinking from the temple as well. She persisted Jaqen that she wants to learn, but he brushes off her discontent. Later on, Arya is accosted in a room by the waif, who repeatedly asks who she is, hitting her when she gives the expected response of no one. Jaqen eventually arrives and demands to know what's going on, and his wife has overstepped her bounds. He does, however, point out that Arya cannot be no one, as she is wearing Arya Stark's clothes, is a possession of silver stolen by Arya Stark, and was about to attack the waif using Arya Stark's sword. Rousing at this point, Arya binds her old clothing into a rock and tosses it into the lagoon along with the stolen silver. She can't bring herself to discard needle so easily, instead hides it within a seawall nearby. Back at the house, Jaqen allows Arya to progress to an inner chamber where she is to assist the waif in stripping and washing corpses. The waif is sad when Arya asks what happens to the bodies after they are cleaned. And finally, in Volantis, Meanwhile, further south in the Free Cities, Tyrion Lannister and Varys finally arrive at Volantis. Sick of the carriage they've been riding in, Tyrion again dismisses the dangers and insists they leave to explore. The pair move through the long bridges and markets, where Varys explains the meaning of the various tattoos Valentine slaves must sport. Varys nearly loses Tyrion, but finds him observing the sermon of a red priestess. Tyrion says he's curious, since Thoros the Mirror was the only red priest at King's Landing. The red priestess evangelizes in High Valyrian, telling the tale of how she was once a slave herself. Like another red priestess, she preaches of a prophesied savior, the Dragon Queen. Tyrion's interest in the scene wanes when the priestess halts in her sermon and stares directly into his eyes. Tyrion next leads Varys to a brothel. Catching sight of a prostitute dressed as Daenerys, Varys tells Tyrion that a woman who inspires both sermons and horrors is probably worth meeting. Tyrion woos a dark-haired prostitute, but when she finally agrees to service him, he finds he can't bring himself to patronize her. He then goes off to urinate off the side of the bridge, with Varys losing sight of him. As Tyrion finishes, he's abducted by Jorah Mormont, and declares he's taking him to the Queen. Dun dun dun. So let's take a look at some behind-the-scenes notes from this episode. The episode title is a reference to the High Sparrow, a new character introduced this season. Daenerys Targaryen and Meereen do not appear in this episode, though Tyrion and Varys do discuss her. Dorne and House Martell do not appear in this episode, nor do Jaime Lannister and Ser Bronn, currently en route to Dorne. House Greyjoy does not appear in this episode. Now that she is Tommen's queen, Marjorie has at least shifted to start dressing in the same style as Cersei does, seemingly nonverbal threat that she is starting to replace Cersei in every way. A continuity error occurs in the brothel scene. In the first shot, the prostitute dressed like the smith has the sleeves of her tunic rolled down, exposing her breasts. When the camera shifts angles, her top suddenly switches to being fully on and covering her. Samantha Bentley, the actress who plays the prostitute costumed as a stranger in the Seven roleplay with I Accepted at King's Landing, with hair down over her face, also plays the prostitute wearing a Daenerys Targaryen costume in Volantis. She also played a third prostitute last season, a prostitute in a bathhouse in Bravos. Costume designer Michelle Clapton explained how the idea to have a prostitute in a Volantis brothel cosplaying as Daenerys, wearing Essa's cut-out imitation of Daenerys' costume. She came up with the design as a joke. A good laugh was had by all, and when they decided it was so funny that they should put the joke costume in the actual TV show, into the actual TV show. As Clapton said, quote, "I want to shock showrunners David Benioff and Dan Weiss, because they always ask me to do outrageous things. I just thought, fine, I'm going to do a costume no ass. And they were like, what were you thinking, Clapton? But also when the costume made into the show, and the whole essence of Dany is there. There are all circles cut in and bits missing in her dress, so I thought it would be really funny. Some people said, well, how would they know what she looked like? She's this iconic woman, so of course people talk and gossip and know what people look like. It was meant to be amusing," end quote. Clapton's original sarcastic sketch for the prostitute's outfit had cutouts in both the back and the front, exposing her genitals. Benioff and Weiss thought that would be a little too much for the joke, however, which is why the final version only has the back cut out. At the small council, Pycelle briefly remarks that they shouldn't scold the High Septon for visiting a brothel, because a man's private affairs should be kept private. As seen back in seasons 1 and 2, Pycelle himself enjoys spending time with prostitutes, despite the fact that just like a Septon, as a maester he has taken a vow of celibacy. Cersei even shoots him a silent glance after he says this, apparently aware of his activities. Pycelle, however, was at least discreet enough to have prostitutes smuggled into him, instead of brazenly visiting a brothel in the city. This episode marks the first time that Maisie Williams, Arya Stark, has had a costume change since the end of Season 1. For over 3 seasons, she has been wearing the same nondescript clothes of a commoner or pretending to be a boy. Maisie said in interviews that finally getting costume change, and even having a big scene in which she symbolically throws her costumes away, was very cathartic. The scene where Arya is belittled for wearing the same clothes, Shriven is a bit hypocritical. After not being able to enter when she first arrived, it seems as though Arya was sought out and brought back to the house of black and white. So she was allowed as a would-be trainee to become no one. She should have been offered to change the clothes. The man known as Jack had met Arya years before and saw the clothes she wore. It seems he would have remembered that at least he could have done was offer her a change of clothes similar to what the waif wears. She was about to start a new way of life, in a new land with people she barely knew. Or he should have been expected to know that she should discard the only clothes she had to wear for something different to wear to prove she was ready for the training it required to become no one. It's hard to imagine that she would have been offered different clothes to wear and turned them down. The Faceless Men are part Assassin's Guild, part mystical religious order. They worship the many-faced god, the god of death. It's a syncretic religion that believes that there is only one god, death, who has revealed himself to different cultures using many different faces, but they're all fundamentally the same. Every major religion has some aspect that worships or venerates death. Polytheistic religions have a god with dominion over death, the stranger of the seven, and monotheistic religions have a god who still has powers over death. The Faceless Men believe that all of these death gods were just one god who revealed himself in different ways to different peoples. This episode marks the first on-screen appearance of Atlantis, making it the third of the free cities to appear on screen after Pentos and Bravos. Atlantis was the first of the free cities, founded as colonies by the Valerian freehold. Atlantis is by far the most populous, although it has disproportionately the largest slave population compared to any of the other free cities. Atlantis and Bravos are complete opposites. Atlantis was the first colony built by the Dragon Lords of Valeria, while Bravos was actually founded by escaped slaves freeing from the Valerians, making it unique among the free cities, as the others were all Valerian colonies. Bravos is the northernmost of the free cities, but Atlantis is the southernmost. Bravos is a city of canals whose strength is at sea, while Atlantis' vast population makes it the greatest strength on land. Atlantis and Bravos are bitter rivals. In the generations right after the doom of Valeria, Atlantis tried to rebuild the empire by conquering the other free cities in a series of conflicts known as the Century of Blood, but Atlantis was eventually defeated by an alliance of the other free cities, and over time its position as the most powerful free city was taken by Bravos, although Atlantis is still one of the more formidable free cities. The reason that Tyrion is going to take a ship from Atlantis to Marine instead of going by land is explained more fully in the novels. The overlying route is widely considered to be unsafe because it passes through the ruins of the Valerian Peninsula and is little used. The Demon Road between the free cities and Slaver's Bay passes through the city of Mantaris and is considered extremely perilous. It is not specified in the novel exactly what kind of danger lurks there. Therefore, most west-east travel is rarely done by ship, making a long voyage around the shattered Valerian Peninsula, making sure to put a large distance between their sea route and the smoking ruins of old Valeria, still burning on the horizon. Ships making the journey therefore spend a long time at sea without taking on new provisions from the coast, and because Atlantis is the closest of the free cities to Slaver's Bay, any ships that are going to make the voyage east launch from Atlantis to make the journey as short as possible with as many provisions as they can carry. Incidentally, this is also one of the reasons that Atlantis has such a large slave population. It's the main hub for slave traders traveling west from Slaver's Bay itself, who then sell slaves in Atlantis' markets to slave masters from the other free cities. The wide shots of the Long Bridge of Atlantis were filmed at the famous Roman Bridge of Cordoba, Spain, which then had multiple stories of buildings digitally added on top of the real bridge. Tisa Maker was from Atlantis, and back in Season 2 she mentioned that the slaves in the city are given facial tattoos to indicate their assigned profession. Ferris gives a quick rundown of some of the tattoos as he and Tyrion pass. The hands of dead criminals are hung on display along the large bridge of Atlantis, with signs under them stating their crimes such as marauder, betrayer, etc., which is a detail from the novels. One of the street signs visible in the episode reads, Kring Aumio, sorry I mispronounced that, which was confirmed to mean evildoer in High Valerian. A few other signs are visible on screen, written in various foreign-looking scripts. The show's linguist David J. Pearson, however, confirmed that they're not Valerian script or even a real writing system, just gobbledygook that the art department came up with, which has no actual meaning. In universe, they may be scripts from other faraway lands, or even purely decorative. Pearson said they weren't worth scrutinizing. There were so many new sets in Season 5 that the production team physically didn't have the time or resources to develop new sets and costumes for Atlantis, particularly because it only appears in one episode. The production team got around this by artfully reusing sets and props from other parts of the TV series. The main set was previously used for Moat Cailin and Harrenhal, while every single door, window, and shutter was reused from something else. The interior of the brothel the Tyrion enters is similar reuse of the Molestown brothel seen in Season 4. The costumes worn by the background extras were a mixture of outfits from Marine and the Vale of Arryn, with a few alterations to make them look slightly different. The Red Priestess of the Lord of Light that Tyrion and Varys see preaching to a crowd of slaves is wearing a necklace with an elongated hexagon decoration. The hexagon design itself is the motif developed for the costumes for characters from Ashai in the TV series. Melisandre and Quaithe also have clothing with this hexagon pattern to indicate their shared origin. While many different religions are worshipped in the Free Cities, the Lord of Light religion is by far the largest religion in Volantis. The Red Priestess in Volantis is the first East Asian actor to appear with speaking lines in the TV series. There are people in the known world of the novels who are ethnically East Asian in appearance, but live in the far east of Essos, where Succarth and the Dothraki Sea, or the great empire of Yi Ti, the Narrow's analog to ancient China. Through the slave trade, and this priestess says she was a slave, some Yitish slaves do end up in other lands, though this priestess may have been sent to Volantis, such as Melisandre, also a former slave, was sent to Westeros. Tyrion recalls that Thoros Samir was the only Red Priest at King's Landing for years. He was sent as a missionary, but it didn't really work out, so instead he mostly hung around King Robert's court as one of his drinking buddies and tournament companions. Thoros was introduced and last appeared back in Season 3. Notice how when Tyrion and Varys stop to listen to the Red Priestess' sermon, Tyrion clearly understands what she is saying, and makes sarcastic commentary about her statements, indicating that Tyrion speaks High Valyrian. Similar to Latin in the real-life Middle Ages, High Valyrian is the language of a once mighty empire, and after its fall it became the language of well-educated people across much of the world. Many well-educated lords in Westeros are given lessons in High Valyrian as they grow up, though their skill with it varies how much they apply themselves to it, i.e., a lord like Robert Baratheon would ignore such lessons and devote more time to sparring practice. In the novels, Arya Stark was given some basic lessons in High Valyrian by Master Luwin, though not enough to really understand it yet. Samuel Tarly knows High Valyrian reasonably well, as a boy who loved books more than fighting, but modestly says that he knows relatively little. Tyrion, however, is very intelligent and knows High Valyrian on a near fluent level. Tyrion explains that the Stoneman is what infected the people with grayscale, is what people infected with grayscale are often called. Grayscale is the disease that Shireen Baratheon had that marred her face, though she was cured of the disease and no longer has it. Back in Season 2, Brandon Tarth had dismissed Jaime Lannister's statement that Rhaenys Baratheon was homosexual as lies. In this episode, she outright says that Rhaenys was interested in men. It isn't clear if she always knew but simply refused to admit it to Jaime back then, or if she was originally in denial but Jaime's blunt statement about him made her finally accept the truth. Either way, Bran should have known that any fantasies she had about being with Rhaenys are unrealistic after he married Margaery Tyrell. The backstory the Podrick gives now about Sir Loromir stealing a ham and sharing it with him indeed happened in the first novel, before the battle on Green Fork. This was not included in Season 1 of the TV series because Podrick was not introduced at the beginning of Season 2. Therefore, Podrick finally explains in this episode he was doing off-screen during Season 1. Similarly, the backstory that Bran gives in this episode about herself and how she came to Rhaenys' service were given when she first appeared in the second novel, but were not included in Season 2 due to time constraints. Bran specifically says that she was her father's only living child. In the novels, Bran did have two younger sisters, but they both died in the cradle. She also had an older brother named Galadon, but he drowned when she was 8 years old, leaving her as Selwyn's only surviving child and heir. Bran says that she can't make Podrick a knight, though she can train him to fight. Only a knight can dub another man with the rank and status of knighthood, but Bran isn't a knight, because women cannot be knights. She can still teach him how to fight as well as a knight, though. This is the first time on the show the phrase "the North remembers" is said. Kit Harington explained in the in-episode guide that Jon's initial hesitation to behead Janos Slynt is meant to be a direct parallel to when Corin wanted him to behead Ygritte back in Season 2. Jon could execute Ygritte then because he felt it was dishonorable to kill an unarmed opponent in cold blood. particularly in that situation because he didn't think letting her go would endanger the scouting party. Now, as the sign of John's growth and how he must harden himself to command, he overcomes his hesitation and is able to execute Janos, even though Janos is currently unarmed and pleading for mercy. As John knows that if Janos lives, he will continue to subvert and damage his command. Harrington also said that he based much of how he played the scene on how Richard Madden played the scene in Season 3's Kissed by Fire, where Rob Stark executes Rickard Karstark. In both cases, it was something that John and Rob realized that they had to do to maintain control and punish subordinates who had defied them. At the same time, they were both clearly dismayed by what they were doing. This is in contrast with the Lannisters and Boltons, who have subordinates executed at slight provocation and feel no guilt about it. Contrast with how, in the same episode, Ramsay Philby punishes Lord Kerwin for refusing his orders by flaying him alive, but subsequently, Ramsay is casually feasting and shows no remorse. He's even wryly proud that his actions made the new Lord Kerwin submit to him. Harrington said that he wasn't sure if Jon Snow was aware of just how personally involved Janos Slynt was in portraying his father, Eddard Stark, at the end of Season 1. Those who heard from Janos' frequent boast that he is an ally of the Lannisters. In the novels, the scene is told from Jon's inner POV. When Jon gives Slynt the order for the first time, at his quarters he muses, "There was blood between us. The man helped slay my father and did his best to have me killed as well." Hence Jon heard some about Slynt's part in Eddard's death, although it was not mentioned by whom and when in the previous novels. Jon suppresses his personal feelings, however, accepting the fact that when a man joins the Watch, his past deeds are erased clean, no matter what crimes he has committed. Jon says executes Slynt not out of revenge, but because Janos defied his orders, both in private and in public, and very obnoxiously and disrespectfully. Because if one man publicly refuses his orders, he won't be able to command any of the others, and the punishment for treason is officially death. Even so, just before the beheading, as Janos pleads for mercy, Jon in his inner thought monologue notes that it's too late for that. He could execute him for one refusal of his orders, and Jon's turn is to give him 3 chances before asking for a sword, which, as Jon thinks to himself, is more chances than Janos gave his father. Harrington said that he was somewhat disturbed to behead someone on screen like this, given the current wave of violence in the Middle East involving frequent beheadings. Even though the third novel in which Jon beheads Janos was published back in 2000, and the series had already established since the first episode that beheading was a common form of execution used in Westeros. Even so, he said that it would have been wrong and detracted from the integrity of the drama if the episode avoided it. As Janos is being dragged out to the chopping block, he insists that if Jon is trying to scare him, he has powerful friends back in the capital. Back at the beginning of Season 2, in the Nightlands, when Tyrion had Janos exiled to the Wall, he seemed like he had powerful friends in the capital, even as guards were dragging him off. Tyrion pointed out then that if he meant how Cersei rewarded him with a lordship for portraying Eddard Stark, he was fooled to think that Cersei considered him a friend. And indeed, while Cersei was anointed Tyrion, Janos wasn't worth contradicting the hand of the king's orders over. Even if Janos really had powerful friends in the capital, he wouldn't have ended up at the Wall in the first place. Slynt's death has been foreshadowed in the first novel, in a way the TV show couldn't easily do. In Sansa's inner thought monologue, she remembered how Janos threw her father down on his knees, forced Ellen to behead, and he fully wishes that if this were like one of her romantic songs, some hero would come along to throw Slynt down on his knees and behead him in punishment for his betrayal. Then a voice in her head reminds her the bitter reason she has learned shortly before. This is Westeros, where there are no heroes, and evil people like Joffrey, Janos, and Cersei always triumph. It takes 4 novels, but eventually the narrative starts proving wrong her thoughts from that moment, as the Lannisters unravel. The TV series include this because Sansa couldn't say it out loud while Joffrey's prisoner. In the Winterfell scenes, look closely and it can be seen that the Boltons smashed all the Stark direwolf statues and frescoes in the castle. As with how Daenerys' forces in Meereen this season have smashed the faces of all Harpy statues, symbol now former slave masters, the Boltons can physically remove all the direwolf statues, though in this case it wasn't so much because they were load-bearing, but because they were busy making basic repairs to the castle and didn't have time for the extra work. Still, The Boltons make a quick pass through the castle, smashing out the faces of all the direwolf stonework. Ramsay Bolton's initial scene with his father is longer in the novels and gives some added details. Notice that Ramsay is feasting on heaping platters of meat, even though other characters have been warning that winter is coming very soon now. In this episode itself, Jon Snow points out that the Night's Watch can't beat Stannis Baratheon's army at the wall indefinitely without depleting their own stores for the long winter ahead. Stannis also realizes this, and says he wants to march toward Winterfell within 2 weeks, to get there before winter snows trap him at the wall. In the novels, as Ramsay makes his way back north, he stops at Barrowtown and commands the local lord of House Stout, Baron of House Dustin, to hold a feast for him. Lord Stout pleads with Ramsay they have already slaughtered all their livestock in anticipation of the coming winter, except for their small breeding stock. If Ramsay forces him to slaughter their remaining breeding stock, he have no way of rebuilding his herds afterwards, meaning that a year from now he won't be able to supply himself or Ramsay with new livestock to eat. Ramsay forces him to slaughter his breeding stock anyway to provide a feast, and greedily eats it. This moment epitomizes the major point about Ramsay. He gives absolutely no thought to the future consequences of his actions, and never plans for tomorrow. Similarly, Ramsay tortured Lord Cerwyn to death for refusing him, publicly flaying him alive along with his wife and brother, relying on the short-term gain that this would terrify the other Cerwyns into submission. As Roose angrily points out, this was detrimental in the long term, because it angered the Cerwyns against him. Ramsay also flayed his enemies alive at the Second Winterfell and the siege of O'Calan, even though they had surrendered in good faith and he had promised them safe passage. Everyone hearing that if he breaks his word often enough, no one will ever trust him again in the future. It is the first episode which is adapted, or rather loosely though, from a sample chapter of the unpublished 6th novel, The Winds of Winter. So overall, I think this, and yes, I know there are some other things I could talk about from this episode, like Tom and Sage and everything going on with Sansa's storyline, but I'm not going to get into that, so there you go. So yeah, overall, I think this episode is kind of interesting, and yeah, of course, we all know what's eventually going to happen between Sansa and Ramsay eventually, so there's that. Yay. So overall, I give High Sparrow 3 Iron Thrones out of 5. Anyway, tune in again on Fridays when we take a look at the next episode, Sons of the Harpy. So, until then, remember everyone, winter is coming.